Okay, I have my 2007 PT Cruiser here, and we're going to be putting another engine in this thing. I was going to turn it over, but the battery that was in there is just completely ruined. It's boiling out the acid and stuff, so I'm going to have to get another battery. But basically, if you can, crank it over if you've gotten it hot and you don't hear any resistance and it's just turning over easily, it's a very good sign that you have completely warped your heads and ruined the engine. It's really, you can replace the head. Sometimes it's not worth it, depending on the miles. I think this one's like 200,000, and it's a possibility that you've blew the rings and the cylinder walls and everything, so sometimes it's not even worth taking a risk. But anyways, I got another engine. This one's got like 60,000 miles on it, and it's all ready to go. I'm debating on, I've got a timing kit sitting around, debating on putting it on here. This one here doesn't look too bad, but we may go ahead and slap that on while I got it out anyways. But well, this thing's all ready to go here. So the first thing that I'm going to get started on this is removing this front bumper here. It's just a lot of times removing a bumper actually clears up a lot of room to make things easier. I'm not saying that you'd have to drop it out the bottom, but in my case, the way I'm going to be doing it, I need to get this bumper off. So I'm going to start with that, and we'll probably go ahead and remove this little center grill and stuff. So I'm going to start there, getting this front bumper. I'll show you how we're going to do that. Okay, another thing you'll notice, this is hanging down and broken over here on this edge, and I'm going to be fixing that while I've got this bumper out. So another good reason to be removing this. But if you come in here, the hood up, you've got 4 of these 7mm. Go ahead and take those out, and then just go ahead and stick them back in the holes where they came from. When you get this bumper, get these out, it's loose here. Usually if it's not been broken already, it'll have tabs. You actually have to push down a little bit and then pop it out. You'll push down and you'll feel it pop, and then you pull it straight up. Now a lot of times, so you can see those right there, and that's how they clip in there. They hadn't been broken. These actually aren't broken, and they're intact. So you kind of like just give it a little push down and then tug it up and unhook those out of those slots there. So we'll go ahead and set that aside, and you notice we've got some more right here. I believe these are 7s as well. We'll go ahead and take this one and this one out, and this one here is broken on this side. Okay, now you'll notice I already got the battery out. Like I said, the battery was shot, and you can see all that battery acid down in there that was boiling out. The battery's basically ruined. I tried charging it and putting distilled water in it. It was just boiling over, so that battery is just completely trash. So I'd already took that out, and in case you don't know, removing the battery, you have to pop this air housing out of your way to be able to get the battery out. And you've got a little tube right here to disconnect, so we can go ahead and remove that. And really, surprisingly, after you get this battery and air box out of the way, how much room it clears up with this car. And then once we start removing a few other things, you can kind of get to everything very easily. So anyways, we got these up here. Put the bolts back where they go so you're not losing them. You'll be surprised how quickly things come up missing. Now this side over here is already loose because this piece is broken. That's a very weak point on these PT Cruiser bumpers, but there is a way to fix that, and I'm going to do a video specifically on that. Now if we come in here to this fender well, we've got these 7mm in here on this flap, and we have to get this out of the way so we can get to the 10mm that are up under here. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little ratchet because it's easier to get in here with that, and go ahead and remove these. and then we'll move on. Like I said, I'm just using a little ratchet. This thing has been tremendously handy. Probably one of my handiest tools. You know, a lot of times you get in a tight spot and you just can't get a normal size ratchet. And once you got it broke loose, you know, you can get in there with something like this and just finish taking it on out. So I'm going to get these three here. Okay, so just pull this flat back, get in there with a little bit of a deep socket 10mm and a small ratchet, and you'll get right up under here. It's kind of hard to show you, but the 10mm are just right up here underneath here. I'll give you a better visual of where those are located when we get them loose. Okay, so here's these two 10mm we removed that were just vertically there. Now this will pop down right here. You can see those, how they come in right there. So you just got those two, and you can kind of see why this is a weak point here. I mean, this is all that's holding this bumper up pretty much on this side. You know, you got some clips on the bottom, and then it slides into a couple nubs here, and then has this. But you know, if you hit something, that's it, boom. And that's what probably happened over here. They just bumped something, and that's all it takes. But you can fix that. It's not ever going to be perfect, but you can fix it with some epoxy and make it as good as new. And it beats buying another bumper. They're very expensive, you know, unless you can get lucky and find one in a salvage yard cheap. These bumpers are expensive. So we're going to have a few under the bottom here. Okay, as far as the bottom goes, I got those sides loose. There was just a couple of these little pop rivets under here. Don't lose those. I thought that there were supposed to be some bolts going through, but if they were, they're broken. But this is completely loose. We can just go ahead and get it out of the way. So this other side was completely broken. And there's the flap. So unless you have some lights connected, that's all you have to do to get that loose. So like I said, just keep up, put your screws back where they go so you're not losing stuff. And now you can see, actually makes it where you can see stuff a little better. This piece I could tell was bent. Not for sure what happened there, but somebody was trying to tow it on that. Okay, so with the bumper, I went ahead and just took the air box out. Like I said, just got this hose. There's one connector that runs to it. It's not a bad idea to label stuff if you need. I think the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and remove this battery box. We've got 4 of these 10mm. Just go ahead and take all of them out and get this completely out of the way. Okay, we're just lifting this up and out, and there's one little wire clip right there that just needs to be pried up. Okay, and the way I always do it when I'm taking an engine out is I will remove the AC and the power steering. This is your power steering reservoir, and you can see how it runs back there. Now there is a couple of stubby bolts on this bracket in behind here. If I can show you, I can point to them. They're right back down in here where my hand's pointing. We need to get those out of there to get this loose from the engine. And we've got 3 bolts running from the bracket to the front cover through the power steering pump, and of course the belt will have to come off. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this. I'm also going to be removing the AC compressor, so I'll need to get up there or get under there and do that. I was just trying at this point to remove a few things up here that I could get to before removing some other stuff. And so we're going to go ahead at this point. We've got 3 of these 10mm holding this bracket here. We've got a bolt right here that needs to come out. And once this is loose, we can lift this up and just kind of hang it down here out of the way. You can take this completely off if you want and get it out of your way, but make sure to mark this with a marker so you can get your hood latch back into position. So we're just going to go ahead and remove this. This will just peel up, and you can just completely take it off the car and throw it out of your way. So we're going to go ahead and do this. Like I said, you know, you don't have to do it this way. If you want to evacuate your AC and just take your power steering hoses loose, you can leave them attached to the engine. However, I don't want to mess with that. I'm just going to take it off of the engine and bring the engine down and simply reconnect it when I put the engine on. I just don't want to have to mess with draining any of that and anything more than I have to. Okay, now this is very interesting here. As you can see, I was wondering what caused the overheating problem. You know, when I put an engine in, I usually change the thermostat and I'll go through a lot of different things to try to figure out what's going on. But this right here, you know, is the cause of the failure. This radiator completely blew out right there, and this looks like it's probably the original radiator. Like I said, this thing has around 200,000 miles on it. So the problem is when, you know, something like this happens, instead of pulling over, people will continue to drive to try to get it that last little bit, or, you know, to try to get it somewhere where they can park it out of the way. But, you know, by that time it's gone. You know, once you lose that kind of coolant, it's just too late. The engine's overheated and it's trashed. So that's why it's important to stop, if you can, immediately and get out of the road and kill that engine. But this actually makes it a lot easier for me because I didn't know what caused the failure or the overheat. I knew it had been overheated. I've seen enough of these when you crank them over and it's just no compression. There's no need in even going through any checks. I know exactly what's going on. So anyway, this will need to just go ahead and come out. I didn't even know until I took this off, so I'm glad I did this early on. So this will have to come out anyways. So we'll probably go ahead. I don't imagine that I'm going to have any coolant to have to worry about draining. I don't know. There shouldn't be a lot in here. So anyways, we'll see about getting this out of here shortly. But like I said, just put your bolts back where they go. We just set this down here out of the way for now, but we'll have to get another radiator as well. And these things, you know, they're plastic and they just don't hold up like they used to. If you get an all aluminum one, they're pretty good. With this plastic, I mean, just the fact that it got 200,000 miles is pretty amazing to me. Okay, so just went ahead and popped this off. I like to use a long screwdriver to push it off. This thing's really stick on there, more especially since it's been overheated. And so just move that clip back. This thing is junk here, but it's gonna move back enough I can get to my power steering bolts. There's 3 13 millimeters down there that I need to take out, and see if I can. It's kind of hard to show you, but they're right down there on the back side of this bracket here that you can see, and I'm going to get those next. Okay, so I was about to get ahead of myself. I actually got to get that belt off before I mess with that power steering, but this is where I jack it up, and I've got a couple of jack stands. And before I go to crawling under here, I'll probably put some more blocks or some more jack stands for safety. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and get both of these tires off. We're going to be using a 19 millimeter to bust these loose, so we're just going to go ahead and do that and get both the wheels off each side. Okay, and while we're on these wheels, we've got them both removed from both sides. We're going to go ahead and focus on these CV axles. I think go ahead and pop these out and let the get us a pan, let that transmission fluid drain for a bit. But the first thing, we got to get this cotter pin. Said I'm using an impact for everything, so if you don't have the impact, you'll have to put your wheel on and put some weight back on it and lower it back down to be able to break this loose. So we're going to go ahead and get this off first. Okay, and with that cotter pin out, you go ahead and take and remove this, and just keep up with all this stuff. and that comes off. And we're going to go ahead and get a 32 and take that off. With that axle off, you'll have a little washer you'll need to get in there and get that off, and then we'll just kind of put this stuff back on once we get the axle out so we're not losing it. Okay, come back here behind your caliper. You got an 18 right there, and then you got an 18 that's right down here. You're going to take both those out. We'll remove this entire caliper and wire it right up here. Now if it gets stuck, take you a screwdriver in here and give it some pressure, kind of push that piston back, because if the rotors are wore, you'll have a little bit of difficulty wiggling it off. So that's the next thing. We're just going to take this 18 here and then that lower 18 and wire it right up here completely out of the way. Okay, so we're just taking this top one out, and then we'll get that lower one. There's what that looks like. And let's say just take your bolts and put them back where they go, so you're not losing them. Kind of get a hand on this once you get this loose, just in case it tries to flop down on you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get it and just wire it up right here, and we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Okay, we're going to work on these strut bolts here. You're going to need a 21 to hold on this nut on this side. I'm using a 13/16, and you'll need to take it loose from the nut side. The side that my wrench is on there has the splines, so you just need to hold this a little bit while you break this here loose, and we'll go ahead and remove that. Okay, now I took it completely off, but you'll want to leave that on there flush to the end, and we're going to take a hammer in a second, and we're going to take and knock that out. So we're going to go ahead and take this bottom one here. Okay, so we just want to get it so flush with the end so we can knock those out. Now we're going to take a hammer. So this end has splines on it. It's meant to hold it a little bit so you can tighten it here to keep it from spinning. I usually just put a wrench on it just to keep it from spinning anyway, because sometimes they will strip, and these have quite a bit of torque on them. So we're going to go ahead and hit this with a hammer or something and get them knocked out of here. Okay, so there we go. Now we'll just finish taking that nut off. And we'll get that one off. And now we should be able to lightly tap these out the rest of the way. And if you can't get it out, you can take and get a little screwdriver and knock it the rest of the way through there. Sometimes they want to stick up. You can also move this around if it's in a kink and push them out. So I'm going to go ahead and get that one there. Like I said, we're going to go over and do the same exact thing on the other side. Once I get this out, we'll carefully wiggle this out of this knuckle here. Okay, so just give that a push back, and that'll kind of come out of there like that. Now we're going to take a rubber mallet and hit this here and knock this out. Be careful, don't go to yanking on it. You can pop this out of its sockets here, and you'll have to either get another one or fix that. So we're just going to hit it here, and if it doesn't move, then you spray it with some WD-40. Use a rubber mallet so you're not damaging your threads. Now I'm just going to get back here with a little pry bar and just kind of finish wiggling and prying it out of there. Okay, and there that is completely out. We're going to take our washers and everything and put them back on this to keep up with them, and also to protect the ends of these threads a little bit. So we'll just put everything back on here so we're not losing it. Okay, so there we have everything back on there in the order that it came off, and we also put our bolts back up here. Now we're ready to get this out. However, we're going to go to the other side and do the exact same thing. that I did over here, and then I'll show you removing the CV axles. Okay, so we're getting ready to get under the car here and get this CV axle, and we're going to have to crawl back under here. Okay, so I just got my pry bar. We've got a pan here ready because we're going to lose some fluid a little bit. And you can pretty much just take this thing and just rock it a little bit, and it's usually enough to pop that clip loose. And boom. I kind of had my pan a little bit out of position, but we'll just let that drain, and then we'll get on the other side. Hopefully we don't have a lot come out here on the other side, but we're going to have to get these out, and we'll probably find something to plug these off with as well, because if not, this stuff's just going to be dripping everywhere. So we'll get something to try to plug these up with. But here is the passenger one. We popped it out. We're just going to get on the outside, and we're going to pop that driver's side out. This is pretty much ready to come out. I've got it pulled out enough. We'll just get out here on this outside, and we're just going to pull it right through here. We'll want to get both hands on it, and you can see we've got it all, but now we want to get both hands on it to support it as we're bringing it out, so we're not digging it up, and take special care with that end there, and try not to damage your CV axle seal. Okay, and here's the passenger side out. Okay, so I'm out here on this driver's side, and I'm just going to take this bar, and you can see how it kind of sets back in there a little bit. But we're going to get in here. We'll turn this in here that way and work on this. Now, I still got a lot of draining going on over there, so I'm going to give it just a minute. But I'm going to sit here and just rock this, and it's usually enough to pop it out of there. So if I have to, I can use my small crowbar, but just have to rock it a little bit from side to give it a little pull. And like I said, this one is actually sets back in that collar there a little bit, so it's a little bit trickier to get but it'll come loose without too much. Just kind of move it to a spot, and you can kind of see where I'm at right there, and we'll just get on that and just kind of rock it a little bit till we get it loose, and if we have to, we can move it over here to a different position there. Okay, so there's that one loose. Like I said, we just come through this angle right over here with this pry bar and just gotta hit it like that. We've got it completely loose. So now it's kind of dripping on both sides here, and we've got our passenger side out, and I'm just getting ready to pull this one here out. It's pretty well loose. Just be sure to get a hand on it so it doesn't fall down. It's just almost completely loose. And there we have that. Like I said, this is just, I've got everything on here so we don't damage this. Okay, and here they are, just sitting down here. And like I said, you want to make sure this is clean before you put it back in, and it's not a bad idea to change your seals out. And usually these are different sizes, so you have to make sure to specify the passenger or the driver's. Make sure you got the correct one. Our CV's out. We're going to go ahead and focus back over here. We're going to get on this tensioner right here, and we'll just pull it this way and then pop this belt off, and then we're going to work on removing our power steering pump, and we're going to remove our AC compressor as well. Okay, so I'm working on this AC compressor. These two down here on the lower portion are pretty easy. This one here and this one here, easy to get to. I'm just using a ratchet, 13 millimeter. There's one up here on the top. It's a little more difficult. And then the one that I'm on right here is particularly difficult to get to, but I've got wiggle room because my radiator's loose. So I took that front brace off. I can move this. You can see I can move this and get a little slack. So I'm busting it loose with the ratchet and a little cheater bar. These are extremely tight. And then you can see I don't have a lot of room, so I'm going to get up there with my little ratchet wrench and get it the rest of the way to get it loose. And right here you got a safety tab. Push that back and then squeeze this connector. Go ahead and get that off. There's one more connector and we'll get that. Be mindful of how stuff routes. You see how it runs around that bracket there. Just be mindful of how your wires and stuff route so you get them back. So I'm just working on these 4 bolts. Like I said, we're going to just take a ratchet wrench and get these the rest of the way. I've got it here somewhere. And we'll just work on getting, once, like I said, they're extremely tight at first, but you can get pretty much most of them out. The top ones, you don't really have room, so you just have to get them loose and kind of let it dangle. We will be taking this radiator out. I'm just not ready to take it out just yet, but most of these will come right out, and we'll get all the wires and stuff. And there is a bracket above this where the power steering is on. We're going to get on that next, and we're going to go ahead and remove that bracket as well. There's only like 2 15mm holding it, and that will allow me to slide the engine down no problem. And it will not, this compressor is not going to get in the way regardless, but just in case, I will go ahead and remove that bracket so I can slide it straight down. Now, a lot of people will just take these out. You know, you can have your AC evacuated if you want, as there's no problem doing that, but I'm going to do it this way. Okay, so we got 3 of those AC compressor bolts out, and just wanted to show you the other one's in there still, right back there. It's hitting on the radiator, but I can move this now. It's just sitting here on the ledge. I can move this now and get that bolt. I was just going to show you this connector right here. Push up on this tab, red tab, with a screwdriver, and then just squeeze it right here, and it'll come right off. Okay, so there's that connector off there. Just push up on that tab. So this is completely freed up from the engine, so that I can rotate this around, and it doesn't hurt it to hang a little bit. I'll probably get some zip ties or something eventually, but with it out here, I'm able to twist it and get this other bolt out of the way. But really, I mean, it's not even necessary to take it out. It's not going to really be in the way. But there's all 4 of those, and like I said, this thing is completely loose. We'll just set it right there for now. And so we're going to be coming out the bottom, so I'll have to be mindful of everything. Now this is the power steering hose running underneath here. Now it may be that I cannot simply take the power steering loose. I may have to wind up taking a hose loose anyways. I'm going to look at it here. I'm not 100% sure, but if I'm going to have to take that hose loose and drain the power steering or lose a little bit of fluid, there's really no need in me going through the trouble of removing it to have to do that anyway. So I'm going to look at it here and see exactly what I'm going to have to do. If I just have to take one hose, we'll see what I'm looking at here. Okay, so we're just down here draining some coolant. There is your drain petcock right there. Just turn that counterclockwise. And once I get that, we're going to go ahead and get this clamp off right here. Take a big screwdriver and push this hose off, because we're going to go ahead at this point and work on getting this radiator out of here. Okay, so we got our hose loose over on that other side, and I'm just getting ready. Just got it hanging there. I'm ready to get this connector right here. This is for the fan. It's a little 4-prong connector, and we're just going to get this here loose, and we'll have that disconnected, and we'll get the, let's see, we've got the transmission cooler lines. I believe it should be running in. Actually, it's got its own separate. Some of these cars are different. Some run into the radiator and some have their own. This one has its own right here, so I guess I don't have to worry about that. Okay, so on this one it had the little zip tie snap here running through the connector, so I had to cut that. And you can see how it's running through there, and it's right in the way. So with this out, it will allow me to squeeze this connector and disconnect it. Okay, so we just got this connector disconnected from this plug over here, and this fan looks like it's no good too. I was looking at the front of it here. If you can see that right there, all that burn and charred. Definitely, I don't know how this thing was running. Even if it was, I don't see how. So I should. Okay, so we've got three. You should have 3 10 millimeters running down. Looks like one's missing. One down. There's 2 anyways on this side that's actually holding to the condenser. There's the one down here that I'm pointing at, one up here, and if you come over to this side, we've got 3 that go right down through this side. There's 3 10 millimeters, and just get a little small ratchet. It'll be easier to get to. Okay, so yeah, the transmission cooler is attached down there. So there's going to be either 2 or 3 on each side, depending on if somebody's worked on and removed some of them. So we're going to get those out, and that's going to free it up from the condenser, and then we'll be able to go ahead and lift it up. We've got the connector, the main connector, disconnected there. The transmission lines on yours may run into the actual radiator, because you can, some of them are like that, but this one, like I said, it has its own cooler here, and they're not running into the radiator itself. So yours may be running into the radiator, and if that's the case, you'll have to take those loose, and you'll want to plug those hoses, or they'll just be dripping everywhere too. This is the size little 10 millimeter wrench I'm using to get those 10 millimeters on that radiator. Okay, so we got those 5 bolts out, so we should be ready to come up and out of here. Sometimes it wants to hang up, but it should slide up and out. Be careful. It's not a bad idea to slip a piece of cardboard down in here to protect these fins on the condenser. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so here's this. You can see where those are located. Basically, they're bolting through to that condenser, and just take all those out. And there's actually only 2 on the condenser, so that one was not even necessary to take loose. It was just it's holding the. So there's only 2 on here, so you just got the 1, 2, and then that will release the condenser. I said I put a piece of cardboard right in here as I brought it up, so it wasn't damaging it. And this is just kind of flopping in the wind now because the oil cooler was attached. That will actually, okay, so there is 3, because if you count the oil cooler, but there's only 2 on the condenser itself. So anyways, you can see it frees up quite a bit of room here. It's going to make it probably a little bit easier for me to remove my wire harness and stuff. But I've got the air compressor loose, and I'm going to see what to do about this power steering because the hose is running underneath. I may be having to disconnect it anyways, so I'm going to see what I'm going to do about that. But we're getting there. We've got the CV axles out. There's not a lot. We got to disconnect some for these wire harnesses, and we've got like the shifter cable, and some we've got some wires going in over here that are going to be running to various things. We'll have to disconnect and make sure that we label. So we're just going to continue on here. Okay, so next thing I'm going to take out these two 10 millimeters, or I think they're 10 millimeters, and we're going to just free up this whole entire box here. So you can see we're able to move this thing around wherever we need it. We got lots of slack, so then we can see the shifter cable. We can get to that and various other things. We'll probably, depending on, we'll probably go ahead and get these coolant hoses up here. I'll probably just disconnect them right here because it looks like it'll be the easiest. We'll just push them back off. We'll just disconnect them here and push them back. So probably just go ahead and do that next while I'm thinking about it. Okay, and take you a long screwdriver and just push these off. They can really stick on there. I'm just going to do the same thing on the bottom. Okay, and you got some safety locks here for this main harness. Push that back and go ahead and push down, and these are sometimes kind of difficult to wiggle loose. And make sure to label these. You also got a little pop rivet, and you can take and pop that up or whatever. So just push that back and push down and just wiggle it a little bit, and it should come right off. Okay, and you can see those are color coded too, where they go, and see how it's freed up that part of the harness. Now over here we've got a ground. We're going to have to get loose right here, and then that'll free up this. So we're going to go ahead and take that ground right there loose. Okay, and I just labeled those so I don't forget what was going on with that ground. And it's down here out of the way. Now right here we have this particular wire that runs into this box. We're just going to disconnect it right here, and we'll label it as well. Okay, this is a 11 millimeter, by the way. That nut there was a 15. You can see we got this freed up for this now. So we don't have a whole lot of stuff to remove. We just need to make sure we label, or take pictures or whatever to where stuff goes, so we don't have any confusion going back. Okay, we're working on this throttle cable. I sprayed some lithium grease on this. I'm using a pair of spreaders. You can use a pry bar or something, but I've just got over here and use my spreader to lift up on this a little bit. And that's how I'm doing this, and I've just about got it here. It's kind of tricky to get into position in here to do something, but there we go. It'll just pop up off there, but spray a little bit of lubricant on there. It'll make it a little bit easier for you. And just here, just push in on these on each side. Got one on each side. Just push in on those and just push that right back through, and just said keep in mind where stuff goes, but it just kind of routes right through here, and we're just going to put that back here out of the way for now. It'll be fine. Okay, you got a little connector over here that's connected to the side. When I moved it, it broke loose from its clip, but you push this lock back that way and then press really hard right there. This one was really stuck, had to press tremendously hard to get that loose. Okay, and you see it frees that up from that. So we'll go ahead and tape those ends up as well. Okay, I'm just going to focus on my tension up here. I'm getting ready to pop these little vacuum lines loose using a little pry bar. I'm just going ahead and labeled them. So just to make sure, a lot of times, you know, you'll know where stuff goes, but it doesn't hurt. Just so you're not having to think about it later on. It doesn't hurt to label stuff or take pictures or something. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these off and we'll move on. We'll go ahead and get on this throttle housing. Just push here, and you got a clip right here. Push that in, pushes that down, push that one in. Just get that out of your way. Now just reach in here and pull these back and slide these out one at a time. And all you do is flip it back and then you can slide this over. It's just hard to do one-handed. Okay, so with those flipped out of there, said just flip it over and then wrap that cable around and pop it right out. This right here has a little tiny clip. You can usually get that with your fingernail. Just push it in. It's the only thing holding this. Well, this one's being a little stubborn, but just take and pull that little clip and then this will slide out. Hold on a second, get at it from a different way here. And it's very easy to break some of this stuff, so you have to be delicate. So that's all it is, a little bitty clip that slides into that hole. So go ahead and slide these out. And so just remember where stuff goes. This one goes on the inside, and this one goes on the outside. It's your cruise control and your throttle. So we've got those cleared up, and we're just going to continue on here. Okay, I just disconnected this vacuum hose right here. Now I want to disconnect this fuel line. We're going to do it back up here because it'll be easier to get to than on this intake here. We just squeeze those gray connector in, squeeze in on each side, and that will pop off. And have your rag or something in case there's pressure on it there, and have something for it to drip on. Okay, and I've got my fuel line, just throw it back up here for now out of the way. Go ahead and disconnect this for your overflow. Have that out of the way. So we're just going to continue on. We're going to have to get under there and disconnect that exhaust. You can see right there. We're going to have to disconnect that exhaust down there. We may go ahead and hop on that next. We've got pretty much everything with the exception of the power steering. So I was going to try to leave the power steering, but I don't know that I'll be able to do that just yet, because that line that runs right here, you can see this runs from the power steering, is running underneath. It has a hose under there and it runs over to the rack, and I'm just not seeing a good way of doing this. So we're probably just going to have to disconnect it and lose some fluid. Okay, so right now we are getting back under the back of the car, getting ready to disconnect this exhaust, and it does make it easier if you got your car up a little higher. Now you can see there is 13mm nuts. There's 4 of them all together around this. There's the other one. You can see them. And then there is one on the top. And you can see I have a long assortment of extensions, probably about 2.5 or 3 foot here, getting to this. So you can get them. I want to get them with my impact, but you have to have the extension to get back here behind this to get up there to them, and then you can just use the impact to get them loose. So that's what I'm getting ready to do, and we're going to get this exhaust loosened up from the engine. Okay, so we got our exhaust, 4 exhaust nuts loosened up. Now I'm back here directly under where your heater core hoses are. Go straight down, you see my wrench right on that back that goes on to the power steering. Now that particular one right there is the one that's running underneath the car. So usually I'm pulling engines out the top so I can avoid taking this power steering loose, but in this case this runs underneath. I got to take it out the bottom. It's not going to work, so I'm going to disconnect it here because it's running under the car, so it's going to be easier to go ahead and disconnect it here. And also have to be careful with it, because it wouldn't be any easier to disconnect it at the pump, and then I've got to you know, contend with disconnecting even more. So I'm going to disconnect it there, and then I'm going to disconnect, once we get that, we're going to disconnect the hose here that's running down. We're going to disconnect that one as well. So we'll get a drain pan down there. It'll essentially just be disconnected from the engine altogether. So right now I've got an 18 millimeter, and I'm just on that back one right there. You can see the hose with the clamp, and then you got the 18 millimeter right there, and that's the one I'm loosening up right now. I'm going to just take that. It's like a little pipe flare fitting, whatever, and I'm going to take that loose and take that completely out of there, and I'll loosen that up. Okay, so we got that loose, and I just got it down into my drain pan there. You can see draining. Now this one right here, coming down from the reservoir, you can see right here, all I got to do is take this little clip and push it back, and I'll be able to just push that off there, and that'll release it from this that's running to this little oil cooler here for the power steering. So just a little clamp, just squeeze that, move it back, and you can disconnect this hose here, and that will have all of the power steering hoses disconnected from the vehicle. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and I'll get my bucket over here and let that drain as well. Okay, and here we are. We've got that hose disconnected right there, and it's loose from that. Okay, so I've took off this passenger side mount. You just have an 18 bolt here and a couple of 15s holding this bracket, and what I'm going to do is use this bracket. I've gotten a shorter bolt that threads into where the bolt that was in the mount goes, basically, and we're just going to take and get this hooked up here and bolt it down where onto the top of this timing cover, and I'm just going to use it as my lift point. You could pretty much attach it anywhere, just wherever the handiest place is, basically. I've got another one right here on this bracket here, and got a bolt through that. So that's how we're going to get a hold of it, and basically all we have to do is just hold it enough to set it down. And I'm going to go ahead, once I get the cherry picker on it, and go ahead and start getting some of these other mounts loose. Okay, like I said, you can rig your chain up in a different way if you like, but this is how I'm going to rig it up to lower it. I want to make sure there's enough distance for me to drop it down here as well, so I got enough slack to keep lowering, and I should have plenty, so I can keep coming all the way down to here. But anyways, it's starting to get dark, so we're just going to call it a night. We'll get back on it tomorrow, but I pretty much have got everything that I can think of. There may be still maybe a couple things, but I think I've got everything I can think of here that you see me take loose, and we're ready to start lowering it. I want to get something under here. Okay, so back here today, I was talking about putting something under here so we can roll this engine out. And what I've got here is this is a Harbor Freight dolly. It's supposed to be rated for 1,000 pounds, so we're gonna see what it can do. Now, I stepped here and it's actually weak where those are at, so I'm just gonna cut a couple of links of 2x4. This thing is like 18 by 30, this little movers dolly, but it should work. I'm just gonna put these, I'm just cut a couple of 2x4s, and then we're gonna fasten them right here where these are, so it's not gonna be so weak. I'm just worried that it would break right there. But so you can see how it barely fits in between my my lift here, so I'm just kind of improvising this as I go. And I expect that I'm going to have to probably nail on some more attachments to keep this engine, because it's top heavy, to keep it from trying to tilt or whatever. But we're just going to play it by ear and see what happens here. So I'm pretty much ready to drop it down once I get the mounts loose. So I'm going to fasten these up, and then we're going to go ahead and continue on. Okay, dolly's in the position, and you see how it fits in between there, just enough to get to it. And we got our boom extended out here, and I'm just getting ready to, we're going to put a little tension on it. We're going to go ahead and get these motor mounts loose, and then we're got to get over here and get this one on this side. I got the one on the top over here loose, so I've got the main engine mount over here in the fender well, the lower torsion mount, and then the transmission mount over here on this side. So okay, we're fixing to start taking those loose. Okay, so we're going to start here. We're going to remove this 15 and this 15 nut, remove this bracket, and then we'll get on to the mount here. This is an 18. Okay, once you get the bracket out of the way, the washer and the nut, the stud's 18 as well. It goes through the back part right there. Now we just have to remove the bolt for the front here. See the condition of that. Let's get to check these. You'll need yourself a T55 Torx to get this one right here. We're going to go ahead and break that loose. Okay, and that's what that bolt looks like, and that is the main engine mount. It is being supported by the lift at this point. It's completely loose on this side. Now we're going to hop over here and get these 15s. We've got 2 of them, and once that's loose, I suspect it's going to drop down a little bit. I'll probably go real slowly with it. I don't want it to fall, and I may get something under there, some more blocks or something, just to keep it from dropping down too much. But I've got most of the weight supported here, so it is going to drop down. Okay, it did drop down, but it didn't drop a whole lot, and this is pretty well holding it. Actually pretty equal for the most part, considering where it's rigged up. Just leave those bolts. These are completely loose, but you don't have to take them out. Just leave them there so you know where they go. And so we're just going to carefully start going down with it here. We'll do some double checking. I've got to watch my compressor. I don't want to get it wedged over here, so I'm just going to keep an eye on that. And probably go ahead and take this dipstick out of here, because it's just going to get in the way. I don't need it there. Now it attaches right here as a 10 millimeter or something, but it was already missing. But we've got the AC loose, And I believe everything, like I said, it's not uncommon to forget one thing or something, so I'm just going to cautiously go down here with it and watch what I'm doing. And you notice I've got cardboard under here because there's going to be a little bit of leakage. Even though we drain this, there's always a little bit of leakage of fluid, so you want to catch all that. Put you a good couple layers of cardboard down. Okay, I'm carefully going down. The only thing that was getting close to hitting was this alternator, and I've just nudged it forward a little bit, and the exhaust, we nudged it forward and got it off of the exhaust. We got to watch out for our little oil cooler for the power steering down there. Looks like I need to come more forward so we can clear that, and we've got plenty of room. The only thing I have here is this compressor to pull up out of the way, so we need to come forward a little more to clear that little cooler. I know I've got an O2 sensor right here. I've got slack, so I'm gonna wait until I get lowered a little more, and then I'll go ahead and take that loose. At least I think it's an O2 sensor. Alright, so I moved this other little brace in front of the condenser. It's just 4 little 10 millimeters. I moved that out of the way because I was worried about my fins on the condenser, because in order to clear this oil cooler down here, that's probably wouldn't be a bad idea just to remove that, but that'd be more work. But I'm just taking this stuff up here and pushing it forward because it's got more room to move the condenser with that other little piece out of the way, and I'm pulling my AC compressor forward so I can clear this back here. So other than that, I'm not really having any problems. Okay, so I run into a little bit of problem right here. The alternator is hanging up. It would be actually easy to remove this alternator at this point, but I think that I can scoot the engine towards the driver's side, and I've got enough clearance, so I'm going to do that. I'm just having to watch for this little oil cooler over here. The heat shield and stuff is getting really close to it. I would recommend taking that off, and if you wanted to, you could take your alternator off and it'd be less stuff to have to worry about, but I don't have the clearance to move it forward. I'm going to hit up here, so I'm going to go push it towards the driver's side, and I've got plenty of room over here to move it. I can show you. So we got plenty of room. This end's down, and we can slide it a good little ways here before we hit anything. I went ahead and unhooked this O2 sensor. It's the only other thing that I've seen that I even missed. We went ahead and unhooked that. So like I said, we're going to slide it to the driver's side, and hopefully won't have to take that alternator off and just continue dropping it down. Okay, so I'm not going to have the room I needed with this alternator on here, but as you can see, it's very easy to get to. I'm going to take the whole bracket off, probably, because I think it's going to get in the way. Now there are, if I remember, there's like this bolt right here, and then there's a couple more on the engine there, but they're easy to get to. Tensioner is right back here. 13 millimeter is right here where my finger, if you can see that, right there. And so we're just going to get these 15s and just go ahead and take this alternator and this bracket loose, because it's just giving me trouble here and I need this clearance. Okay, so I went ahead and took that alternator out. It didn't take but like 2 minutes. Everything's easy. So there's the tensioner. That's all that thing is. Just a bolt that goes through another bolt and stud. And I'm just getting ready to take this bracket off. I already took this one with the impact. I can't really get in here. I've got these two 15s. I'm fixing to just take them with a ratchet. Okay, so we got that bracket out of the way. It's cleared up all that room here, so it's not being hitting on my frame. I'm just got to watch for that little oil cooler now. Okay, I have this brace that holds up the radiator. It's held on by 4 13 millimeters. I took it off. It was just right under here on this part of the frame. and it was just getting too close to the transmission here, so I just went ahead and took that out of the way, because the main problem is this little oil cooler fins. I should have taken that off, so I'd recommend taking that off, because there's just not enough room, and I'm just barely clearing it down there. So make sure you take that off. It'll make it easier on it. I'm definitely going to take it off once I get this engine out before putting the other one back in. Okay, so we got the lift out of the way. Just to show you, we've got it setting down on the dolly. It actually surprisingly feels somewhat stable, so I think it's going to be stable enough to roll it out of here without having to do a whole lot more. And everything that I could see, the only thing that was aggravating was the oil cooler. I'm definitely going to be taking that off before it goes back in, because I was having to, it made things 10 times harder watching this heat shield here and everything, keeping it off the oil cooler and the oil cooler line. So that will be coming off of there before I go back in. And like I said, everything else was pretty easy going. And then when we go back in, we'll put the alternator back on as we get it into position. But not really in trouble. I didn't, the only thing I unhooked other than what I'd unhooked earlier was just the O2 sensor. You can see how it's setting on. Actually, surprised that it worked out as well as it did on here. I mean, it's setting on here, not the best in the world, but all things considered, it'll be fine. And I think that it's going to work out. The worst case, I'll just have to get my lift a hold of it and put a few more supports, but I'm hoping that it's going to be stable enough here and supported that I can just carefully roll it out. So that's the plan. Now on to the next stage, is getting the car up and out of my way. Okay, so I just got a good strap on this front piece here. It's good and solid, and we're going to go ahead and start lifting this up carefully and just keep an eye on everything in here again, but everything should be clear at this point. Okay, so I'm just lifting it up here. We just about got it clear. Having to watch this frame right here a little bit on this side, just kind of moving it accordingly. Everything else is pretty much clear. There's no problems over here on this side, looks like whatsoever. But we'll go ahead and just continue lifting it up till we can squeeze this out of here. We're going to have to get above this right here at least, unless I reorient it and come through the center. But we're just going to keep on lifting it here. Okay, like I said, if you're going to do this, definitely be safe. I have got this thing blocked up. I've got a jack stand, and the same on the other side. And we've got this thing lifted up now. We can go ahead and get our lift out of the way. So we got it up high enough to where it'll clear. And this here is just kind of dangling here. Got the cardboard protecting it. But you can see about how high we've had to come up here. And we're just going to dolly it out from under here slowly and carefully. So we've got it blocked up over here. Definitely, if you're going to do this, have some good jack stands or plenty of blocks and backup blocks just to keep everything safe. So here we are coming out the bottom. We're just using, you know, the basic tools that most people have. You know, we don't all have 4-post lift, so sometimes you got to improvise. So we've got it up here, and we're going to go ahead and get this cherry picker out of the way at this point. You can see with like this, easy to get to everything. Definitely easy to get to your timing and stuff. So don't know that it ain't a bad idea to do it this way. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and roll it out of here. Just give you another look at this, and we've had to come up, you know, pretty good ways. Like I said, that's why another reason I wanted the bumper out of the way, because I'm going to use that centerpiece there, and also for clearance. So I took that all out of the way. Okay, I went ahead and zip tied the transmission cooler, and we zip tied condenser. Got a bungee strap on the AC compressor. Just going to hold that up there. So we're ready to go ahead and start wheeling it out from under here slowly and carefully. Okay, so here we are, and it was definitely easy to roll once I got off my cardboard. Set all my cardboard and down there catching the oil and stuff coming out. But we've definitely tested this Harbor Freight to the max. It's supposed to be 1,000-pound capacity, and it is getting the job done. So I just had to put a couple braces on there. Don't even know that I needed those, but it's definitely helping to hold it a little bit stable there. And I got a couple of 2x4s here just as a shim kind of. So there should be, and I'm just getting ready to roll it up into the garage here, and we'll get the lift back on it and have to get some of this stuff loose on the bottom, get our flywheel loose. We're all out from under the car, and there's a view of it sitting there. I'm going to take a measurement, see exactly how high up I had to go with this thing. But I've got blocks and I got jack stands backing up the blocks, so you know, like I said, if you're going to do this, be safe. You know, you can do it at your own risk, but definitely be safe. So we're just going to go ahead and get this in here, and we'll work on getting this engine swapped out here. This is the 60,000 mile one, and we'll just work on getting that hooked up. Probably going to put a new timing assembly on it since I've got one just sitting around not using it. I'll probably just go ahead because it won't take me no time to slap it on there with it out like this. So anyways, we're just going to go ahead and get this on in here. Okay, back out here today. I'm getting ready to start swapping some stuff over there. We're going to get the timing belt on here. I'm just going to show you this grounding strap here that runs around to the back of this cylinder head. That actually, I did miss that. Show you right here. This is where it snapped. I didn't even hear this thing snap, but it's not a big deal. It was corroded, looks like, anyways. But it just connects up here onto this part of your frame. So don't forget that. But it's not a big deal. I'll just crimp it right back together, and it's not a problem at all. But anyways, going to go ahead and first thing, I got to get this crank pulley off. We're going to go ahead and get another belt on here. This is a low mild engine. However, it's not going to hurt to go ahead and put a belt on here because they're only good for so many miles. This is your little tensioner here, and you can see the little window thing there that tells you if you got it the proper tension on it. We're going to go ahead and get this crank pulley off and get this cover here off. We'll get a better look at it here. Okay, we went ahead and got that timing belt on. I got the cover back on here. I wanted to, I'll leave a link. I've got a video on doing the timing, and there's a lot of others, so I didn't want to just take the time to do all that. But when they take these from the salvage yard, the way it works, a lot of times they just go through and they cut them out as quick as they can. So all your wire harness, everything has been cut. It's no good. So we got to go through here and figure out what can be salvaged and what can't. Like this connector running up through here to this may be okay. To our injectors, we'll have to disconnect it here, but all this has been cut here, so this is no good. So we've got to go through the painstaking process of swapping everything over here. So that's what I'm going to do right now, and we're just going to get our wires and stuff, just take our time and move what we can here. Nothing critical. The power steering pump, I've got to get that over here. Like I said, those hoses are cut, so I'll need to get the hose off there. So it's nothing big, it's just a matter of just moving good parts over and replacing stuff that's been cut. And that's all I'm going to be doing here. I want to get some of this stuff moved over, and then we'll go ahead and work on breaking this transmission apart, and see about getting it mated up to this right here. Hopefully get some progress here. Okay, so essentially I've just taken the wires loose and folded them, everything that I can, back over here onto the transmission, and I'm getting ready to lift it up. The first thing I've got to get under here, I've got like a couple of bolts that are a little difficult to get to on the bottom, and we're going to have to get our flex plate and torque converter bolts out. We got 4 of those, so we're going to have to get this lifted up a little bit here with the lift and get under there and get them, and then we're just going to lower it back down, and we'll go ahead and separate it with lift in place on the engine here. This engine's top heavy, so I expect it's going to try to fall. The transmission will be fine, and we're going to go ahead and get them separated, and then I'm going to set the engine over here against this wall where it'll stay put for now, out of the way, and shouldn't be really anything else I need to get off of here. So that's what I'm doing. So we got to go ahead and lift it up. So we got to get to those torque converter bolts and separate the flex plate carefully so we don't make a big mess and get even more transmission fluid. And I didn't know if I gave you a good view earlier of what I don't ask me what the bolt size is, but I got a shorter bolt to go in here. I wouldn't recommend using the original because it's really long, and I'd expect it would bend, and you wouldn't get much use out of it after that unless you have an extra one. But I just found a bolt that was shorter to fit in here, and we just put it right in where that mount bolt would normally go, and then we got over here on this actual lift point, and we just stuck a bolt through that and hooked our chain, and that's working out good. Like I said, you could hook it to a different, you could set it up in a different method. You could get around, a chain or something around the alternator, and you could get over here at this lift point, or you could hook to something else, and you can even use straps. But that's just how I'm doing it. It was, to me, it was the easiest thing that I could see to rig it up at the time, so I just went with that. So anyways, okay, I usually like setting this in the back of the truck to kind of do a lot of this, but I've just got it kind of rigged up here on the lift, and we've just got like a bolt right here. It's an 18. We need to take that loose, and we've already got this one on this side. It holds this bracket. We'll slip that down in just a minute. There's another piece that goes on there. I took that off previously. It's got a couple of 3 15s and then a couple of long 18s that go through there that hold it on that side. Once we get that off, we can get to those flex plate bolts under there. Okay, and there's that piece out of the way. And now you can see the flex plate in there. And you don't have a lot of room to get in here, but you can get in there. It's we'll just get in there with a I've got a little stubby 18 millimeter that actually ground down a little bit because the other one, my ratchet, wouldn't just quite fit in there with a small ratchet, but you can get in there. So we're going to rotate this crank around clockwise till we can line those up, and we'll just take those off of there one at a time. Now we'll also need to kind of get a hand on this so this is not moving while we're trying to break this loose up here. And you know, if you need a second set of hands, not a bad idea, because sometimes it wants to spin. It's kind of hard to do both at once because you got to hold this from turning and you got to break them loose here. Now if the engine's locked up, then well, there's not much you can do. You're just going to have to unbolt your transmission and pry the torque converter out of there and put some pans down because it's going to make a mess. But we're not going to, we're going to lower it back down. We're just taking the flywheel, the flex plate, torque converter bolts off. We're going to lower it back down. We can get to all these other bolts holding the transmission from up top. So once we get these out, we're just going to lower it safely back down onto the floor, and we're going to finish separating it from there. Okay, so we got a 19 millimeter on the crank. We've turned it to where we can get to the first 18 millimeter. And I'll show you, this is a standard socket, stubby socket. You can see how much I ground that down there. It's like a 3/16 or an 1/8 of an inch. And that was like the bare minimum to get this thing to fit in there. Unless you got a real stubby ratchet to get in there with, you're gonna need to grind something down or improvise, because you could have one of those little curved handled wrenches maybe that fit in there just right. I don't know, but this is the best thing I come up with. Okay, and just to show you what I'm talking about, I'm sliding this up in here, but you can see the clearance here, and you just don't have a lot of clearance. And this is just the bare minimum. See, once I get them broke loose, it's usually enough to get up in there and get it with something else the rest of the way, or get it by hand. But you can see there's not a lot of room. So that is what I'm using to get at this, and these are going to be really tight. They only call for, I think, 25 foot-pounds of torque. These things are really tremendously tight, so get ready to get you a cheater pipe and whatever. And I'm actually going to have a little trouble breaking these loose with it up here on this stand flopping around. The only reason that I didn't go ahead and remove these in the vehicle is because of this front plate is so difficult to get to that I didn't want to mess with it. So I'm just going to do it this way. But yeah, these things are really tight, difficult to break loose. You can use a cheater pipe or take your rubber mallet and give it a good hit here, and I've broken them loose like that. But you got to be cautious. Keep it on there good so you don't round your bolts off, or you'll be hunting down more of those, and sometimes those aren't too easy to find. Okay, and once I get it broke loose with the ratchet, because you'll round it off with the wrench, but once I get it loose, I just get in here with the wrench and get it the rest of the way, because you don't have clearance with the ratchet. You just got enough clearance to break it loose, at least with mine, and then you got to get it the rest of the way out with a wrench. There's our first one. So we're just going to rotate it on around here. Okay, there's our 4/18 for the torque converter. Now we got that freed up. Now we're going to go ahead and lower this thing. We're just going to put it back down onto the garage floor here to do this next part. Now, another thing now that when we do separate it, we want to make sure the flex plate separates from the torque converter. Sometimes it'll still hang up and it'll pull the torque converter out. It makes a big mess. The thing holds a lot of fluid. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and just set it down here and we'll finish separating it. We'll leave this attached because this thing's top heavy unless you prop it up like I've got this one over here propped up on a block. It'll fall right over on you. So it's just propped up there because it's really top heavy. So we're going to go ahead and set it down. That's all I've done is took our flex plate and we took that little piece right there off to get to those. And we're going to go ahead and drop it down here. We don't have very many bolts to separate it out here now. We've got all of our wires pulled back over this way, so we'll be able to just get this off of here and hopefully without too much trouble get our other engine over here and get it mated up without any issues. But another thing I would recommend, make sure you WD-40 a lot of these threads and make sure these threads are good and you don't have any broken, snapped off bolts and anything. Sometimes when you get them from the salvage yard, I got one right here for the air compressor that's snapped off. I don't know what I'm going to do with that yet. It's not wanting to budge. I've hit it with some lubricant, but it's not coming out so far. Because I got enough threads there, we may be able to get a couple of nuts on there and try to get it off there that way, but we'll see. If I have to, I can drill it out. And worst case scenario, even if you ruin one of these, you can make do with three. Three is plenty enough to hold it on there. So that's the worst case scenario. And matter of fact, I might could avoid this trouble simply by taking mine. I think I'll just do that. I think I'll just do that because I don't even think it's worth the trouble. I'm just going to take this one off of this side and just pop it over there. It's only held on by a few. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 15 millimeters. That's nothing. I'll probably use that other tensioner because it's a lower mild engine. So I'll probably use that other tensioner. So anyways, I think that's what I'm going to do now because that thing ain't worth messing with. We'll just pop these off here real quick with the impact and swap that over when I got it on my mind. Okay, so we got it sitting down here on the floor. We've only got a few bolts to separate it. There's one you can see right there coming from this side. I believe that is one of the bolts that actually has the 1/2-inch dowel pin that you see on there. It actually lines it up. It's important to, try to tighten those up first before you do any of the rest of them. That's what keeps it aligned. And there'll be one on this other side. We got the starter that's bolted in here. We got a bolt from this side. And we got one from up here. And then we got where you see the ground. Pay attention to where your grounds and your transmission dipstick go there. And then you just got these two 18s up top here. And we're loose. Now the only other piece I took off was that bottom bracket that I was showing you, that it bolts 3 bolts going in here and then a long one coming in the top and a shorter one coming in the bottom, and that holds that bracket on, and it also holds that other big bottom piece you see there on the right on, and then there's just the one more bolt on the other side. So there's not a lot holding this, so that's what I'm doing. I'm just gonna go ahead, I think, get this starter off of here first, and then I should be able to get to all these with the impact. And I've got this rigged up, like I said, so it doesn't fall. And this transmission will be fine. It'll sit here on the floor. I'll split them and move this engine out of the way. Shouldn't need anything else off of it, I don't think. But like I said, that's why it's important to check your engine, your replacement engine. Check your threads. You know, make sure you don't have any snapped off bolts. You don't want to get it in the car and then find out that you got a problem. I've done that several times, and that's why I check it over good. I check the threads, I check for snapped off bolts, I make sure that everything looks good before I get in the car. You know, if I've left any parts off or accessories, I don't want to get in there. You know, like with that air compressor, if that went unnoticed, then I would be having to be messing with that in the vehicle. I don't want to do that. I want to catch all this stuff out here, replace what needs to be replaced, and well, I've got it out. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just work on getting these other bolts out here on this right now. Okay, I just got the 15s. That's one of the 15s coming through this side for the starter, and then I got the 15 coming through that side. Just, you know, keep up with your stuff so you're not losing it. And that's for the starter. And we're just getting ready to get over here on this 18. I just got an extension. We're going to go over here and get that right there next. Now I'm just going to use the same extension. Just come back here and get these two right here, and these are the last two holding it. And like I said, the next thing I'm going to do is get in here with a screwdriver or something once those are loose, and I'm going to push back and make sure that torque converter is pushed back as I'm separating these. I don't want it to get hung. Sometimes if it gets in a kink or a bind, it'll hang up on there and it'll want to pull right out of there, so it makes a big mess. So make sure that you get that fully separated before you go to pulling this apart. Now, so out here, you know, if you got it on some cardboard more especially, it's easy to slide this transmission around. It doesn't weigh a whole lot. Not for sure on the exact, I think it's like 200, a little over 200 pounds. It's easy to slide around. I've slid them with cardboard easily around, in and out from under a car. Engine's a little bit different story. That's why it's on the lift, but I've got it on the lift. I can move it around as need be, and I can slide this here as need be. Okay, and I just kind of left those bolts there for now, and because I'm just basically going to be swapping these around, and I don't want nothing mixed up. But we're ready to go ahead and start separating this out. Like I said, I'm going to get in here carefully and make sure as I'm sliding these apart that torque converter stays put. So we're ready to go ahead and split it. We don't have any more bolts holding it. We've got everything, at least that I am. It should be everything. So we'll go ahead and just start splitting this. Sometimes you have to get one little part started, but you don't want to be taking a screwdriver and just getting rough, because you're going to mess up your bell housing. So just be careful, or use something that's plastic or something. It's not going to be damaging your bell housing, because then you'll have to be filing it back flat and fixing anything. Okay, so I just took this rubber handle of this crescent wrench and just pried a little bit right here. I just kind of got a hold of that and just started this side. Now I'm going to go over to the other side and do the same. And you can see that my torque converter is not hanging up, so it's doing like I want it to for now, but still keep an eye on it. So I'm just going to go over to this other side. I've got a good gap started, and just usually you can just wiggle it right on off of here. And make sure you got tension. If you're holding this up, make sure you got a little bit of tension. You don't want your motor to fall over on you or make sure you got a block or something handy just to be safe when you're doing this. So I'm just going to get on this side and give it a little tug right here, and it should come right on off of there. And here we are, we just wiggled it back out of the way. Now we're just going to kind of go ahead and lift this up, shuffle some stuff around, and just move it over here. The old engine out of the way for now, or put it somewhere. If you're not going to be selling your engine, a lot of times I will go through and take a lot of bolts, nuts, everything. You would be surprised at the wealth of bolts that you can get off of one engine. You never know. I mean, there's all, I've run in a lot of situations, and I keep a big old bucket just full of bolts. And always, there's a snapped off bolt, a missing bolt. You can get a lot of bolts off of one engine. If you're going to be taking it for scrap or whatever. Anyways, it's a good idea just to get everything that you think you might could use in the future off of there. So we'll go ahead and get this out of the way, and then we're going to work on getting the replacement engine over here and see about getting it bolted up. And the reason I'm breathing like this, it is very hot and humid. I know I've got my garage closed, but it's actually cooler with the door closed than it is open. It's just so hot and humid today out there in the sun, so it's kind of makes it kind of stuffy and hard to breathe. Okay, I've got it sitting over here. You have you a piece of plywood with a couple of 2x4s nailed. It works real good for holding it in place where it'll just sit there and keeps it off your garage floor. But I'd made this little piece to lower it was just a makeshift transmission jack, basically. I put it on bolted it on my jack, and it worked just fine. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can improvise to save yourself some money. That way you don't have to have every special tool. But yeah, that thing is actually holding that engine pretty nice and stable. So I was planning on propping it against the wall, but I think it'll work just fine there. So, and it'll be easier if I need to get anything off of it. So we're just getting ready to get over here and get this one now, and we're just going to try to get it matched up here, and hopefully if this heat will ease up, maybe we'll start working it into the vehicle out here today. Go ahead and take the time to spin your motor over too. Make sure that it feels right, that it is turning, it's not locked up. It's not uncommon to get a bad motor. You want to catch it before you do a lot of work. So go ahead and do that, and take and put you some grease or some white silicone on these points. This is your alignment pins here and here, and it's important to kind of you can start whatever bolts you want, just don't get them cross-threaded, but it's important to really tighten these down first. This is what's going to align the transmission. And put you a little bit of grease in there so it'll go in that nub good. Make sure that this is clean. Of course, we know our threads here are good because we just took them out. Just take the time. This is where your alignment dowels are going to go, so make sure these are clean, and put you a little bit of grease in there at these points so it'll go through nice or go together nice and smooth. Maybe take and wipe this surface off. You shouldn't have any nicks unless you nicked it going in, so go ahead and just check it anyways, and make sure it's all nice and clean. Another thing we're going to watch for when putting this together, note where your location where your bolt's going to go. Make sure when we put this together it's going to line up with our holes. So we want to make sure this flywheel is down in that position so they're going to halfway line up. If not, we'll have to turn it a little more. But we want to make sure it's in the general area. And it's more especially true if you have a studded torque converter, because it absolutely has to line up or you're not going to get it together. So this, you got a little wiggle room, but you want to make sure they're close. you know, before you go to putting it together. Make sure that torque converter is down there where you can get your flywheel lined up in the right position. Okay, I got a board just kind of holding this up straight, a little bit straighter here. It's not real easy to get this into position, but you just have to kind of work with it. Just wiggle it around, shim it around, whatever you need to do to wiggle it into place, and you'll get it lined up. You can see we got our torque converter and our holes in about the right position down there. And we're just going to try to slide this together by hand, and we'll see about maybe getting a top bolt started, and then maybe we can lift up on this a little bit if need be and just kind of work it around. It's just, you know, whatever's easiest for you. Just kind of wiggle it into position and work it and shim it wherever need be till you get it lined up. Okay, so you'll slide your transmission around on each side and get those dowels lined up. We've got it pushed up close on this side into alignment. I just kind of threaded those by hand. Do not thread them with the ratchet. If you can't get them to go finger tightening, don't do it, because you're going to tear your threads up because it's not into alignment. I've just now got this one started on this side, so I'm going to go ahead and just wiggle it on up onto that dowel there and carefully make sure that the other side doesn't come loose, and we'll try to get a bolt temporarily started in that other dowel as well, even though, remember, we got this bracket that has to go on there, so we're going to have to get that on there as well. But before we can put that piece on, we need to get this piece over here back on, so it's easier to get it in there, and plus that bolt's got to go through that bottom there, so kind of got to do everything in order. So I'll have to get some of this together, and when I go to lift it up to do the flywheel, we'll do those. Okay, so I was just going about swapping over wires and stuff, and I realized that this pipe, this is the one off the other motor, but I already took the one that was off of this motor and threw it out because it was bent to the point where I couldn't use it. So had to get the one off of the other engine and put on here, and that's the way it happens. Sometimes they don't take a lot of caution when they take these out of the salvage yard, and stuff gets messed up. So I already had to swap out this because it's snap bolt. This was bent, so I had to take it off. So and just to show you, let's see, where is it at? These little things here, if you ever disturb these, I can just tell you from experience, you can do one or two things. Either get you some new 5/8 heater hose and throw this out, or you're going to need to get you a couple of screw clamps to put on here. I've used that where I've had to take this loose from up here and move stuff, you know, doing the heads and whatever. And if you just put the clamp back on here, you can see the way this is indented, it'll leak. I've tried it twice because I thought, well, maybe the first time it was a fluke. No, it leaks every time, and then what I wound up doing is coming back and putting some screw clamps and doubling them up just to get it to not leak. So these are just notorious for leaking once you disturb them. So I would just say get you some new heater hose. It's 5/8, and just cut off what you need there and put you some new hose down here. Like I said, I wouldn't have had to do this, but I had to swap this out, and I disturbed them, so I know for a fact that they will leak. And it's not fun trying to get in here and fix this once you get this car back together, so you don't want any problems like this. So I'm going to go ahead and cut some hose here and get this fixed up. I've already got a lot of my wires attached on this side. This is for the AC compressor, knock sensor, and it's going up to the injectors here, going to our crank, and this is for our starter, which we'll put back on in a minute. And also take a look, I found some scuffed places, some bare wire back here on my harness. In particular, I think I've seen this before, back here going to the alternator, and I took some of this liquid tape and put on here real good, and I'm letting it set up, and I'm going to wrap this up with some tape, and we're going to also put some of this corrugated wrap around it to protect it here, and I'll probably even put a little bit of my foil tape, maybe to try to keep some of that heat off of it a little bit, because the way it routes around under here by this pipe and stuff. So I may go ahead and do that while I'm at it. Just anything said that's going to be problems. I had two bare wires here. I don't know if it was a problem or not because I wasn't driving the car previously, but I'm betting that there was something going on with it, or it was about to cause some problems. So anyway, we're just connecting wires and stuff to just pretty much everything back where it goes here. Said take yourself pictures. So all I got to do is take the old ones they cut off and just put them right back where they go here. Okay, so I got sidetracked fixing other stuff. We were bolting the transmission up there, but we got us some new hose on here because I had to transfer this heater hose piece over because the one on the salvage motor was bent to where it couldn't be used. So we had to get some new 5/8 hose. This hose was a little bit different in diameter, so the clamps would no longer work. I could spin it with my hand. Now it did, however, feel like it clamped fairly tight up here on this part, so I'll see how that does. If it doesn't hold, then I'll put another one of these clamps, but I definitely put clamps on these. I don't expect I'll have any leaks because this is new hose, but we'll see what happens and keep an eye on it. So anyways, I pretty much got all the wiring hooked up to where I need it. I'm fixing to pop this starter in here. Now, as far as these bolts go, the big 18s, I'm going to tighten them to 45 foot-pounds. These smaller ones, like for the starter, we're going to go 35 on those, on all the smaller boats. So the 15s will go 35. 18s we're going to go 45 foot-pounds. So that's what I'm doing. I'm also going to be putting Loctite, medium Loctite. All these, don't forget to put we got to also put this clamp on here. I've got it on this side over here, you can see, but I was just putting this together to hold it together for now. I'm going to take this back out, put some medium Loctite, and put this on there that holds the wires, and torque that down. Like I said, I just got sidetracked on this other because I started connecting wires and I realized that I had a problem with these heater hose over here, so I had to get that swapped out. Okay, we're just hooking the starter up. I'm putting some medium Loctite on these, and don't forget you got your bracket and your ground that runs up here. Make sure that you have both of those on that. So you got your bracket for your dipstick, and then you got the ground. They both go on the same one, and just put a little bit of medium Loctite. Don't know if I showed you this. I took and put some wrap around this to protect this wire. It was getting chafed and we put a little bit of foil tape on this, kind of protect it a little bit. I had broke this because it was just one of those things I missed, and I do this a lot, but it's so easy to miss something, you know, and these things are, notice it's like really brittle. So I just took what I had laying around. It's more than adequate. It's just a grounding wire. It's really big, but I'm just going to make do with it because it was the only thing I had laying around handy. So we're just going to use that. It's just a typical grounding battery wire you can get anywhere. Of course, you can get smaller gauge than that, but it's just one I had laying around. So I'm going to use that. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and get this starter hooked up, and we'll torque it 35 foot-pounds. I'll go ahead and lift it up and see if I get this flex plate bolted up and get the bottom portion bolted of the transmission, which should be about finished up here. Of course, I'll have to rig my chain back up here. I got to get my chain through here and up here on this front cover. Okay, so we're just back here. We're getting ready to put our bolts back into our flywheel. You can see we got it lined up there. We had it pretty close. We had to turn it just a smidgen. Put you a little medium Loctite on each and every one of these, and we'll just start them as best as you can by hand, and then we'll just snug them all down at once. Okay, so now I've got each one of them Loctited and into place. I'm just going around snugging each of them evenly, and then I'm going to come back around with the torque wrench. We're going to torque them to 25 foot-pounds. Okay, so I said I torqued those. Actually, my torque wrench wouldn't fit in there, and I don't have a little fancy wrench to get in there with, so I just snugged them down really well. I know they're not going to move. Getting ready to put this piece on here. It just goes underneath here, slides underneath, and covers up this place right here. And we just get this bolt going in here, and then with the bracket on the other side. Okay, now we got this bracket goes on this side. You see the three that go right here, and then the two long ones. Let's see. So we're gonna get this up in here first. And there they fell out. That's okay. We're gonna go ahead and get this bottom one started, and we have to get, let's see, this is the one that has the alignment down on the transmission right here as well. So now I got that held in place. I'm going to put some Loctite on these, and we'll put these in last. These up here, we'll make sure they're in position, but you can't get this bolt in without, you know, getting this one in first, or you won't be able to tighten that one. So we're going to go ahead and get some Loctite on these and get this bracket into place. And well, we forgot the bottom plate. This has to go under here. I was getting ahead of myself. And it has to go up like so. This all goes together. And get that lined up. Like I said, I got to put some Loctite on it anyways. I just had experience with stuff vibrating loose in the past, so I like to use Loctite on a lot of stuff. Okay, here we are, got it back down on our roller. You can't underestimate the time it takes to do a lot of prep work, more especially if you're having to swap parts out. And here is the pesky power steering cooler that was getting in the way the whole time. I just went ahead and removed that. It was just like a couple of 10 millimeters holding it down to the frame in there. Just right there, you see those. We took those out of the way. I'm going to leave the alternator off until I get it in there good. I'm going to leave the power steering off because it's really nothing to get in there and put that bracket here on and put it into place. So I'm just going to leave that off because it gives me so much more clearance after having to worry about anything, and it won't take me just a minute to put it on and wrap the hose underneath once it's in there. Plus I'd be having to worry about that hose because I'm going to put it all on as one unit. It's all sitting on over there, so it's just going to attach here, put the pump on, and wrap the hose on around. But I believe I've got everything ready to go. Double checked everything, so I'm just getting ready to roll it over into place here. Right, I've kind of got it into position. I don't know exactly where I need it, but I know it was kind of close to this part of the frame on this timing cover, so I'm positioned it here. And I've kind of got it sort of in a position over here, but until I start lowering it, I'm not going to know. And here's something else that I'm going to have to deal with before I start lowering the car. Just now seen that, noticed it. So anyways, we'll start lowering it here just shortly. Okay, here I am lowering this down. I just took out like a set of blocks and I'm just easing it down, and just figured I'd leave them in just for safety. If it did drop, it'll hit those. And everything's looking pretty good. It says since I took that little oil cooler out, I got a lot more room. And I'm getting close to the heat shield, and this stuff over here I'm gonna have to move. I'm sure I'm gonna have to move the engine around, but I can just dolly it around wherever I need be, because I know this was getting close to my timing covers, but once I get up to a certain point, I can roll the engine this way and clear the other side of this frame over here that's going to try to come in contact with the transmission. I'll just move it around as need be, but right now it looks okay. But I'm fixing to have to move the transmission back up this way, I can tell. And so we're getting, that's really pretty easy. This is working out a lot better than I thought it would, and this dolly's been really good. Okay, so the engine was a little more trouble to get back in than it was to get out. I don't know why. I just had a little bit more trouble dodging the frame in here, but I got it. I worked on what I did was took a jack and lifted this end into position and put the transmission mount, and then I took my lift and pulled it into alignment for the center mount up here. And I think the only other thing that I'm going to do tonight is put this AC compressor back on, because I just don't want it dangling out here. And then we're going to have to get back on it the daylight. Definitely working on it at night makes things way more difficult too, because you just can't see. Messed around and broke my dipstick. I wanted to take this off, but it was stuck in the engine. I couldn't get it out, so I left it earlier thinking it would be okay, but it wound up getting caught and breaking it on this cardboard here. So anyway, it's pretty much all in here now. Anyways, I just kind of lowered the car down and put it on some really low blocks up here and just work the engine back into place. And I'll probably be lifting the car back up some when I need to get some more stuff underneath here. But I think, like I said, for the night, I'm just going to put my AC compressor bolts back in, and I'm just going to call it a night. It's too dark to really do anything. Just have to get back on it in the daylight. Okay, so I just finished putting this compressor back on. Just got the 4 13mm bolts, and those are pretty easy to get in there. I'm going to go ahead and reconnect the connectors I got here. I got one on the back and one right up here, and I'm going to put in the alternator probably next. I'll put that stuff in. I'll get this power steering. It's going to be very easy to put in with the CV axle out and everything. With that bracket out and everything, it'll be very easy to fit it in there. So I just decided to leave it off to have extra room. I still got to get the exhaust hooked up. We're going to wait and do all this when we get some daylight. But all things considered, we've got the main engine mount secured, and we got the transmission side secured. So it's into place. We're just going to get some more accessories on we got to get, and finish getting our mounts on, and really not a whole lot. I've ordered a radiator and a new fan. They were both toast. Probably the fan went out and then blew what was left of a weak radiator, so both of those are gone. So I'm gonna have to get those before I can get it all completed anyways. So everything's pretty much going pretty smoothly so far. It says the first one of these PT Cruisers I've attempted dropping it out the bottom like this, so I think it went pretty smooth, and my little roller dolly worked out really well. That I got, it was like $11 at Harbor Freight for that, so it worked out really well and got the job done. So anyways, we'll get back on it in the daylight. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and stop the video right here, and I'm going to put a link in the description for the part 2. Be sure to click on that and get the remainder of the video, and please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.